get a little bit of money, like extra money, like, that we can blow, I would love to get a timer set, like a piece of paper that just flies off every minute, like so that it would actually look like a tavern. And do the old school because that way I can use my GUI cube koozie. Figured that was the nicer option than Hey, everybody, welcome to the Tavern. I am your host, GM Misfit, otherwise known as the Tabletop Misfits GM. And I love this show. I don't know how many times I have to tell people the Tavern is my favorite show because I don't do any prep at all. I reach out to guests. I tenaciously bug the living heck out of them until they come on my show. No, not really, but I do ask. And tonight we have a wonderful guest. Just ran into him. He has his own podcast, and there's something about science of D&D that kind of just got my eye connected. So I reached out to Robert, and we're going to talk about NPCs tonight. But before we do, I'm just going to let Robert have a quick moment of himself to kind of tell who he is and what he's all about.
Yeah, my name is Robert Walker, and I am the host of the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology podcast. I also wrote a book, the Session Zero. It's the DMG to writing great campaigns in any system. And I've been gaming for about 25 years, on and off. Started with advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but spent the meat of my gaming career in 3rd edition and 3.5. And just very recently have done some Pathfinder 2.0, D&D 5e. So all over the place a little bit. But yeah, I just love the game, and I'm a student of psychology. I'm working on a master's program right now. And so I figured the two things I'm most passionate about, role-playing games and psychology, and there's a lot of interplay between the two of them. There's so much around the table that's, interaction between human beings, which is what psychology really is all about. So it just makes a lot of sense that talking about the two of them together is a thing that needs to be done, especially if you want to understand your players and understand your games and how to make them better. So that's kind of the whole premise behind my show and my book. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we here at the Tavern are kind of built that same way. We love to play games. We love to make great stories. And then when I'm in the Tavern, I love to just bug people, which is great because this is what I feel like this is kind of how the Tavern works. You walk into a tavern, you grab a drink, you sit down with your buddies, and you just talk. There's no real respect. There's no real expectation. There's no real, agenda. You're just here to talk. And I usually try to bring an idea to the table, and it might not even start that way, but usually there's an idea present. Now, where that idea goes, that's what happens at the Tavern. You don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to start there. So what I like to ask my guests first is 3 questions. And I've gotten really good at this now that I've gotten better at not rambling. I'm going to ask all 3 questions one at a time now. So first, when did you start playing Dungeons and Dragons?
So it was in my sophomore year of high school, which, like I said, was 25 years ago. A buddy of mine who's still in my gaming group today first got me into it. He had just picked up a copy of the advanced Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook, and he's like, "Hey, I got this cool thing. It kind of would take 2 of us to really play it. So do you want to give it a shot with me?" And it was off to the races after that. We, met up in my parents' basement as things often happen. And we just, at first, were just basically verbal role play, trying to figure out, how would that work with the rules, and then flipping through the rule book and seeing if there was a rule for something. And then, I think within a year, the first version of 3.0 came out, and we very quickly switched to that. And we were doing 2-3 games a week for years and years, all the way through high school and many years after. And that group, I think 2 of the members are still, myself and 2 others are still part of the group, but our group's pretty good size now. We run with about 8 players in our normal weekly games. So it's a pretty good size
weekly
table.
Game with 8 players.
Yeah, it's a big table. It can be a hassle.
Yeah, 8 players is never something that I recommend.
No, I don't
GMs.
either.
If it happens that way and you have an amazing, just cohesive group, more power to you. But for the average D&D group, I would say 8 players is very, very difficult because of
It
the
is.
fact that if you're not playing for, it depends on how long you're playing too. Most of my games go between 3 and 4 hours.
Mhm.
When I was playing with groups that were a lot bigger than that, we're talking 6, 7, 8 hour games sometimes.
Yep.
So
Yeah, so we usually play for about 5 hours. But we have found ways to, especially combat's a drag when you have that many people, right? Because the rounds can take so long.
oh God, yeah.
You wait for forever, it feels like, especially if you have 3, 4, 5 monsters in the initiative
I mean, at
round.
that point, I'm starting to tell people, if you're not ready when I land,
Yeah.
like, we're moving on.
Yeah. And I mean, we kind of run things sort of like a baseball game. We always have, okay, who's on deck and who's
Right.
at bat.
And when you
Like,
get that many people, you have to, because otherwise you've got to make sure the game keeps, like, somebody has to keep talking, and there just can't be dead silence when there's 9 people. Just not a good
exactly.
idea. But yeah, no, that's a good point. And wow, for many, like, because personally, like, I have children and I have an extremely busy lifestyle,
Yep.
that playing with 8 players at home in my house every single week, I give you so much props, and I give your family so much props for allowing you to do this.
Well, fortunately, I mean, we have a pretty good sized game room that's actually at my buddy's house, and we have a big gaming table that was built to accommodate 6 players. And so we've just kind of added on a couple little side tables for additional players, and now we're in the process of getting ready to start schematics for a new custom table that's going to house everybody. But also, we're also getting ready to do a thing where we're going to split games for a while, go into 2 different groups, run simultaneously, so that we've got a little bit smaller groups, like some classic four-player games, for a little bit. And I think that'll be a refreshing.
You'll see a difference in intricacy.
Oh yeah,
when you've got those small tables. I think most of the time you see that's when people start to really fall in love with their characters. They start to see that balance much more developed. It's very hard sometimes to balance a game when there's that many people. Because really, why add an NPC into the group? You've got 9 people talking.
It's
It's
true.
just not.
It's true, and I always say I'm more than vocal about my point that I think all of my favorite games have been a DM with 3 players. I think all the players get a lot of screen time when that happens. There's a lot of, and you're a little bit shy of the traditional 4-player party, so you have to work together even a little bit more than you would in a traditional 4-person party. So I really like a 3-player game with a single DM, and I think that's a very cohesive group that tends to have really good stories in it.
Yeah, no, 3 to 4 is like my like sweet spot. I'll do 5 if I've got a really good group.
Mhm.
6 is my absolute max. Well, I can't say absolute max because I'm military. We were deployed. There was really nothing else to do but work and play D&D, and we were playing with 11 players twice a week.
But normally we only don't run
yeah.
more than 5, but we just had this weird scenario where we had established this 5-person gaming group, and then all of a sudden a couple people we used to game with moved back into town after being away for years.
So then you got to reintegrate them into the game.
Exactly.
I mean,
it's
otherwise,
like we love playing with them, so we're not going to keep them out when we're right in the middle of a session or a campaign. So get in here and we'll make it work.
Figure this out. Yeah, we'll make it work. It's kind of what happened to us. It's an interesting story. My friend that I had met, literally flying over, we had the connection with D&D very quickly after we started talking. And we sat down at what is called the USO, which is the location while you're deployed that everybody comes to, where you can get board games, you can get video games, movies, whatever you want to watch, whatever you want to do. And I was like, you know what? Let's go to the library. Let's print out 15 character sheets, grab our bag of dice, and just sit and see what happens. Within a week, we had 12 people ready to play. It was insane. Gosh. We had never seen something like that. All we did was have character sheets, and we were just rolling dice like goofballs, building our own characters for no reason.
Convention kind of set up there.
Yeah. So, but we were, like I said, we were downrange in the desert. It's 150 degrees outside. You know, you don't want to be outside anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, our Friday nights would be head to the dining facility, grab a whole box of chicken wings, and then head to the USO and play from like 6 o'clock until like 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And it really reminded me of how I used to play in like high school and college, which was just that fun, a bit of reminiscing that I got to do again, not knowing, I mean, other than the fact that, things are being shot at us and stuff like that, which was not as expected, but
I think
there was that.
The thing that always reminds me of playing in high school is Mountain Dew Code Red, because that was the drink that everybody brought to the table, and we'd stay up all night, hopped up on Mountain Dew.
Yep. Yeah, no, I can feel that one completely. It reminds me, because you don't just come in with like a 2-liter. No, you go with those giant cubes.
Oh,
you set one next to each person, and you're like, all right, let's get this done. But yeah, dice rolling like it was Las Vegas. Yeah, kind of. We were just there just to have fun. We had only been in theater for about a week and a half, and we had just figured out really what we were going to be doing while we were there for the 6 months. And we watched like I think we started Iron Man 1 while we were at first, because we're like, we're just going to do the Marvel series while we're there. And then we started talking, and he's like, oh, I'm a dungeon master back home. And I was like, well, I haven't really DM'd for a while, but I've played quite a bit. He's like, would you like to play? And I was like, well, yeah, we have nothing else to do out here. I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to work, and I'm going to play D&D. Like this was the golden plan here.
Awesome.
And yeah, we met people all over the world, not knowing that D&D was such a connected opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have now friends in we have Danish military, we have Australian military, British military, and they were all coming. They all saw dice and they all saw a table, and they were like, oh yeah, can we play? And I was like, heck yeah, why not? So yeah, it was a whole, there I go. Mike, for some reason, my video keeps swapping. Oh, that's why. Okay. I gotta figure out why that does that, but we'll figure that out in another day. So off on that tangent, that was a bad one, but we'll get back to where we were at. So you've been playing for 25 years. You started during second, third edition. What really got you, or what was rather your starting interest in D&D? Like what brought you to the table? What was your excitement when you first saw the game?
I think for me it was the role play aspect of it. I was really big into theater pretty much my whole life, and just the idea that I could continue to act all the time was what I think was so exciting about it for me. And
nice.
then as I did it and as I played, eventually becoming a DM, that was even, I mean, now I'm creating my own worlds, and it's like I'm writing stories, and
you're a director, you're a producer, you're everything. It's crazy.
Exactly.
Set design,
So that just did it for me. I mean, it pretty much as soon as I played my first character and did something cool, I was like, hell yeah, this is the thing. And I've never had any moment where I've been like, I think I'm done with D&D, because it's always just been like, if I leave it for a week or two, I'm like, yeah, I gotta get back to game.
So it's crazy.
I gotta play again.
That's exactly how I felt. I took a long hiatus from it. Now, mind you, part of mine was the fact that I had a huge family, and kids took over the world for about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Korea for a year and found a small group of D&D players. And when I came back, I said, I looked straight at my wife and I said, now, I hate to say this, I need this back in my life. Like, this kept me sane. And then shortly after we deployed I deployed overseas again, and I was like, and then as soon as I came back, actually while we were downrange, I was talking to some guys. One of them was originally part of the Tabletop Misfits group. I was like, you know what? When I come back, I'm starting my own stream. I want to do this professionally. I want to find a way to do this to make my passion real. And everybody's like, oh yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Da, da, da. Yeah, well, I'm here now. But it did give me that drive to do it. It was like, hey, it is an opportunity, it's a possibility. And the friendships, the community, if I can talk anything, the community that D&D brings is at most one of the best communities I've ever worked around. Now, there are those, of course, little blips, and I know with the whole scandals and stuff that's going on in big D&D world, but I'm talking there's two different types of D&D. There's these guys who is like the main group that connects directly to WotC, and they got all the big numbers and the big money and all that stuff. Then there's this massive group, which is all of us. And that is the most friendly group I've ever met, ever in my life. They've given me opportunities to professionally game. They've given me opportunities to go to conventions. They've given me opportunities to stream, to write books. Like, who does that in any other organization whatsoever? And I just couldn't believe the openings that it did. And also it keeps me sane. Like you'd think you would that be the opposite way, because you're talking 16 different people in your head, but it actually keeps you kind of less crazy, in my opinion.
I mean, I've always said role play is therapy for me.
It is. It really is.
There's just something about it. It's like a reset button. It gives you the opportunity to experience all those like things in your life that are difficult, but to do it in a really safe way.
Yeah.
And you're around a group of people that's very supportive, and they're right there with you the whole time. And so the camaraderie is incredible. And like you said, the community. And once I started this podcast and I started having people reach out to me, just from all over the world, I was amazed. All these people that wanted to talk to me about D&D all of a sudden, and about my experience and about my life. And I've made a handful of new friends in just a few short months of people who I now consider I'm very close to. I'm chatting with them almost every day and talking about their life and their struggles and the way that role play has helped them. And it's awesome. Like the community is incredible. You're right.
Yeah, no, like I said, we work very close to a company called GUI Cube out in Colorado. And just less than 2 years ago, I didn't even know who they were. And now I write for them. Now we stream in their world. We stream in the community world, because the community builds the world itself. And all these different things have just become, and now I talk to these people on a daily basis, right? That's the crazy thing. We build all these relationships and stuff, and then you don't realize how strong the relationships are. One of the coolest moments I ever had in the D&D world so far is Gen Con last year. Now, with COVID and the pandemic and not being able to do much, we were scared that it was just not going to happen. So the year before that, I had met GUI Cube and a lot of the members on there, and we've been talking through Discord and all the online ways to do things. But it was amazing for a large group of us to meet at Gen Con for the first time, and getting to see faces and like actually, I don't like to say that I'm super touchy-feely, but to be able to give somebody a hug that you've known for 2 years and you didn't really know them, it's weird, but it's cool. And it's just a lot of fun to have those moments. And D&D really does give you that opportunity, which I think is amazing. So third question, my last question is, when did you pick up the mantle? So you said you were a character for a while, but when did you decide, you know what, dungeon mastering is where it's at?
So I'd say it was probably a year after I started playing, and it was not until we got into third edition. So I didn't DM at all in advanced D&D, but at one point we had run 4 or 5 games, I think, that my other buddy was running, and we had finally recruited another person into our group. So now there were 3 of us, and I was just like, you know what, I think I want to try DMing. I think, I'm familiar enough with the rules now. We were really starting to get a grasp on the way combat worked and all that stuff. And I had a couple of cool ideas for stories. And so I was just like, I want to do this. I want to give it a shot. So Dustin, who was the DM of the group, and he's DMing the game we're currently in right now, was like, yeah, sure, absolutely, give it a shot. And from that point on, he and I were basically like back and forth forever DMs for the group. We do have other people in our group who DM occasionally, but 9 times out of 10, it's one of the two of us, and we've just been, like I said, nonstop for 25 years. We've been playing, so we've got a lot of games.
That's the nice way to do it, though. I would admit that it's something I don't have the luxury all the time to do. Is to being able to step back and become the player, because I've been GMing now for, oh goodness, 4 straight years straight, no stops really. Every once in a while I'll get a 1Z, 2Z RP session where I can go actually play a character, but most of the time I'm the GM. And we have a wonderful group, and I'm gonna brag on all of them. Last week on our stream, I didn't do anything, and it was amazing. I was like, this is the world that we live in now, where I cannot be a DM all the time. We have an amazing group of DMs. We have an amazing group of players. Our player list grew from 5 of us to about 12 to 15 of us.
Nice.
And we have 3 GMs now. And our new project is going to rotate all of that together to give just these amazing stories one after another, which we're super excited about. And that's my only plug for the night for Plots in Darkenhaven. But if you missed it last week, you missed a good one, because it was really good.
Well, I'm excited. I get to do that this week with you, so looking forward to that.
That's right. You do. You get to play Bowen. I got to see the artwork. He's incredible.
He is incredible.
Tonight, it won't be tonight, probably tomorrow, I'll release the promo image of episode 2. It'll show all of our characters that are going to be playing in it, including your character. So without giving out any secrets, is there anything you want to talk about Bowen? Since we are talking NPCs and characters tonight.
He's a little bit older, a little bit past his prime, ranger. Not too comfortable in the city, but finds himself there anyways. So I think it's going to be a good time.
It is.
I am looking forward to it. The artwork is awesome, and
Brina is.
It looks exactly like what I was picturing. So
that lady can draw amazingly. That's all I'm saying. I have a character. Corey has a character. Our other GM Austin is getting a character done. And then all of our players have characters, and she has taken our ideas and made them either to the T or put her own little inspirations to it to make it even better. My character is over the top, and you won't see him for like another 5 episodes, but when you do, he is over the top, and I love him.
Awesome.
But no, I'm looking forward to GMing Plots in Darkenhaven episode 2 with you guys. I drove behind the scenes tech last week. I loved it. It was amazing to sit back and watch everybody just do their thing, and it made me feel so good that this is where our stream is going. And it's telling amazing stories, it's bringing amazing guests in, and really making that experience something memorable, which I'm super excited to.
It's such a great concept too. Is I guess you could call them sort of like bite-sized stories where you have those recurring characters, your main characters in there.
Yep.
But I love the idea that you can just listen to any episode and not have to be worried about being caught up with 400 episodes of 8-hour-long sessions. It's a great idea.
We did that. We did that for over a year. We played the affordables. We had our whole group that was an amazing group. It can be daunting for me as the GM. It was daunting at days for the players. And, the worst thing that any GM wants to hear is, hey, I can't make it this week. That's horrible. And mind you, for anybody who watched last week's episode, we ran into not 1, not 2, but 3 train wrecks about an hour before the show started. So we had 2 cancellations, and one of them was the guest, and we were like, oh no, what are we gonna do? And thankfully we had another guest who was planning on showing up anyways, and he was our second, and we were lucky enough to have everything work together, and it still came out to be an amazing episode. But it was really, those were the types of problems that we went through when we were doing the affordables, that we decided for plots in Darkenhaven, we wanted to have those problems resolved no matter what. We want to put on 12 weeks of consistent gaming for people to watch that has none of those breaks in the picture. And that's really that was the main reason why we have 3 game masters and 16 players. It's when there's only 4 on screen. So that was the promise that we decided as a group to do so. Yeah. For anybody that likes that stuff and likes the artwork, one way you can support us is to go to our Patreon. We just launched it. You get a little thank you at the end of every show that is going to be a scrolling to let people know that you are the reason why the artwork's produced, the sounds are produced, those types of things. But we started it last week, and we're just hoping people will kind of help us out in keeping these artworks going, because though the artworks are amazing, they are not cheap, and we don't want to make them cheap because our artist is incredible. So yeah. And we're hoping that by season 2, that not only will we have artwork for the characters, but we'll also have artwork for NPCs and scenes and stuff like that. But those get pricey. So that's where we're at with that. Real quick, I want to talk about this because I've read it. Well, I've read parts of it. This is a great book for any GM out there. And I'm doing this not because he's paying me to do it, not because he gifted me this thing, but because I read half of it already within a day and a half period. Broken down very well how to start any campaign. I really liked it. It reminds me a lot of the Lazy Dungeon Master guide, which I follow very closely too. But it does give some neat ideas on top of it. The idea that everything needs to look like a theater movie or a play, stuff like that, where you can connect those moments to emotions and things of that nature. I really liked those bits and pieces that you wrote in about that. And I'm sure I'm going to like the rest, which I was trying to get farther in because I was hoping that there was going to be a lot more about NPCs, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, tonight. I think if you're at chapter 6, I think you're right. NPCs is, I think, right after that. You're
it's
real
like
close.
2 or 3. It's like 2 or 3 chapters after that.
You're real close.
But yeah, no, I had some personal things that came up right before the evening that I had to take care of, and I was like, maybe I'll get to the book before the show starts. I did not. I'll be honest. But I will still read it because it's interesting. And so anybody that's looking for
it to make it very easily consumable. Every chapter ends with just like a short number of bullet points that outlines the ideas that are.
Oh my God, as a guy who goes off on goofball tangents and always is off track, I love the bullet points at the end because I was like, yes, that's exactly what I read, but I didn't remember it as well that way. So now
yeah, and I think that's just the thing. Like if you just picked it up and you wanted to see what are just the highlights, what are just a couple things for me to remember when I'm making an NPC or writing my first adventure, you can just flip to the end of the chapter and there's like 5 or 6 bullet points and it tells you, okay, here's the most important things to remember when you're doing that. And I just wanted to make it very accessible and very easy for people.
Which you did a wonderful job, mind you. Robert, if you would, inside of our Zoom, and I'm going to talk this way because everybody knows that there's no script for this show. Can you please drop the link in Zoom, and then I'll post that link up for your book on Amazon, because I think that people are really going to want to go check that out. It's pretty awesome. I'm not going to lie.
I'll throw it in there. Just take a quick second.
While we're doing that, is it sold at Target or Amazon? I know it's sold at Amazon.
It's on Amazon.
It's sold at Target.
It's not. It's on their global distribution network, but I have not seen it in any stores yet. I'm hoping that it gets there soon.
I have some friends, and I have some places that I know that I might be able to help out with that. But
all right, there it is.
That we can do. Yes, let me grab this this link here, because we have a lot of people in here, and our community supports each other very well, that we want to make sure that people, especially our guests, are getting that opportunity to share what they're doing out in the world. He has another book called The Tools of the Organized DM. It's the NPC Compendium, which is originally why I said, let's talk about NPCs. This was before I had a chance to open the book and find out that it's just a list of, it's a notebook about NPCs that you can just write all the NPCs in.
It's essentially, it's an organizational tool for you to keep track of all the NPCs in your game.
I do everything online. If I could have one page of this on my online version, I could use it all day long, but this thing will never, not for a while at least. I won't say never, because once I start coming back to the table and with our wonderful one of our wonderful sponsors, Last Game Board, when that gets here, I'm gonna have to play on offline for a little bit because I'm curious to play the hybrid version. I don't know if you've ever seen Last Game Board. It's pretty awesome.
I actually have not. No.
So Last Game Board is a giant. Well, I wouldn't say giant, but it's a pretty large TV that literally you can put pucks underneath your minis and move the minis on the TV, and it works. And it's amazing.
Awesome.
And they also have like 600 other board games and stuff that you can get for it as well. But the reason I want it is for D&D.
That is so cool.
But yeah. So NPCs. So there are a bunch of different types of NPCs. And I know this because, I have to write them all the darn time. But I like the way you put them more in a movie setting and stated they're just supporting actors. These are what your characters need to produce a wonderful emotion of either success or failure, depending on what you're going for. And I can think of three main ones, but I don't know. But like I said, I haven't read the full book yet, so I don't know if you have more. But of course, you got your quest giver, which is kind of like Gandalf. You have your actual support, which is, let's say, the tavern owner, the shopkeep, the boy down the street, all these little just around the area people. And then of course you have your antagonist. You have all your bad people. And those are kind of the three that how I break my stuff down. So you either have your good, your neutral, or your evil people. And don't take that the same way, because people now with the whole alignment craziness and blah 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 blah. That's not what I mean. I mean, you have your people that are for the party, people that really don't care if you're for the party or not, and then people who are against the party. I guess would be the best way to put that. So
I mean, that's pretty close. I didn't break them up into specific categories. I mostly talked about how to write them, how to utilize them. But they do pretty much fit into those three categories that you're talking about. I do go on later to talk about the villain, the party's villain. And then I do mention, you're right, quest givers and those who are just like background cast or supporting cast. And I think that's a good way to look at it. But for me, the struggle is always, you've got 4 to, in my case, 7 people playing at your table who are managing 1 or 2 characters each themselves. They might have.
And you're managing 6.
And you're managing an entire world. Like every person that exists in the world that is not one of those specific creatures is you.
Right.
And so really the question is how you make them feel. Each of them feel unique when every single one of them is being played by the same person. And I think that's the big struggle with NPCs is you want them to have a life of their own, a uniqueness that is tangible, so that when the players interact with them, they get the sense that this is a different person than the other person I just interacted with. And so it's really a lot about how you do that, how you accomplish that. And for me, it's just, there's so many little tiny things, but small changes make a big difference.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's one of the big keys with an NPC is you can remember that even if you're not a voice actor, you don't do a lot of, professional voice acting like some of the shows you probably listen to, you can still make each one feel different by giving them different patterns to their speech or different key phrases that they say, mannerisms that they do, and little things like that can still make each one feel unique.
You can also describe somebody differently. If you're saying that the big difference is you've got somebody and you can talk the exact same way, but if you describe somebody as being older, more put together, they're their words seem to kind of quiver as they talk, your players will then understand that thought process. Even if you are not skilled enough to do that,
Right.
they'll then get that concept in their head of, okay, this person can't really speak as well as he's trying to, not because he's dumb, he's old.
Right.
And you can do those things to make it a little easier for you than to be that master voice actor, which we all see on shows.
Right.
Which, you know, I have 3 good voices and that's about it. And that's about as far as it goes. And I can get my voice extremely deep. I can go really high. I can do a really bad Irish accent and a really bad Arab accent. Yeah, and I try not to do some of those because I don't want to offend anybody. If for some reason I become worldwide and people start watching, I don't want to offend anyone. But those are the things I'm learning throughout my career in professional voice and professional gaming and things like that. Is not only do I have to try to go over the top sometimes with my voices, but giving people those descriptions that make sense to connect the voice makes just as much importance, in my opinion, as the voice itself. Because I could say that, because personally, I don't do a good female at all. I've got too low of an octave. I don't really have the balance going. It's really difficult. But if I become softer and I introduce it as you're speaking to a young woman, normally my players will have the interest to go, okay, let's still pay attention. He's not trying to be goofy. It's just, it's hard for me to to create those moments. And I think the whole male to female thing is quite difficult anyways.
Yeah.
I know some people can do it, and more power to them. Most of those people are paid to do that, not me.
Right. Yeah, I think for me, typically I talk a little more whispery, you know. I just kind of soften my voice, don't speak as impactfully as I normally do. So
but then how do you then get something impactful through as a female if you're only always talking like this?
Yeah, it is hard.
It's very difficult.
The gender swap characters are probably, like you mentioned, the hardest to do. So I do try and, like, sometimes I'll do like the fanning, you know, it's like the eye rolling.
Right.
I try and include
eye roll. You do some of the hand motions, things like
possible.
that, mannerisms that change.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing I've always tried to do in my games. And I know a lot of times I've got players who are like, you know what, you don't do it enough sometimes. But it's very hard to be extremely inclusive to everything in D&D. There's 16,000 races. There's, you know, 2 genders, 3 genders, how many ever genders they're connected to with the game.
Right.
And then how those genders connect per race makes differences as well. If you have, let's say, if in your world, Goliath, though, there, and I'm kind of picking this from a show called 7 Deadly Sins, where they've got all the giants, and most of the hierarchy of the giants are female. Well, that's going to look a lot different for most people than a normal giant colony.
Right.
And things like that, where you want to change up these tropes and these stereotypes and those types of things. But at the same time, sometimes it's difficult to then get as much of a change for somebody to be able to see that difference. Also, if anybody is watching, and the people that are watching, if you have questions about NPCs or about D&D, make sure you're throwing those questions up in the chat room so that we can answer those while we're in here. Because that's what this channel is all about. It's about getting better, and me included, because I learn something new every episode. I don't know why I do, but I do. And most of the times my players hate me for it, because it's normally what I will torture my players with the next episode. So
I've come up, I'm having people talk to me on the podcast. I definitely get that. There, all these new ideas come out that I'm just like, oh man, that's great. My players are in so much trouble now.
Agreed. There's only so much a single person can do. I completely agree with you. Only so much. But
I do think one tip I'll give people is if you are trying to do voices, if you're trying to incorporate, like if you have certain races in your game that have a specific speech pattern or specific voice, and you want to base it off something that exists in our real world, as most of the time they are, find a unique way to change it up. And then there's a great piece of advice. I can't remember what show I heard it on, but it's stuck with me over and over again. I'm saying it all the time now, is that really bad impersonations of celebrities make really great characters. So even if you can do like a really bad Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation, they could make a great character, even if it doesn't sound anything like the actual person.
Yep.
It would still get you into doing a voice that is going to make a really cool character.
Right. And the other thing is it depends on how well you are developed at voice acting. But if you know that the characters are only going to see the person for 2 seconds, don't worry about a voice.
Absolutely.
Don't waste your time.
Yep.
If this character is going to be impactful, create your voice, create your personality, make sure that they have something behind them.
Yep.
But I will say that with one caveat, and that is the 10-second Tom that becomes a main villain. And that is the guy that for some reason that everybody falls in love with or hates after 10 seconds. And I've had many of those where you're like, I have a sentence for this guy, like a sentence. Right. He's supposed to be here as a supporting actor for the supporting actor, not a person of any interest.
I don't know what it is. One
player sits down and is like, so tell me your life story.
Yeah.
I'm just like, sure, this is where improv kicks in.
The NPC who's just like briefly on screen, you don't even name him, and then they engage him. So, oh, come on, what's your name? You want to join with a party? You want to? I don't know what it is about something that I think sometimes doing something off the cuff and spontaneous is so refreshing to player characters that grabs their attention sometimes. So over preparing an NPC, I think, can sometimes be a detriment. I like to have simple things planned out for my NPCs. What do they sound like? What value are they adding to the party? So if they're a quest giver, what's the quest they're giving? If they're like an information broker that's at the local tavern that the players can come see and find the latest rumors in town, just kind of know, what do they act like and what do they do for the party? I think those two things can really give you a whole cast of characters.
Agreed. One thing I will tell people, and this I did learn from the lazy DM. This is not DM Misfits. This is not the GM Misfits way of doing things. I learned things from everybody else and then take it, use it myself. So what they do is they pick all those information, those secrets and rumors and stuff, and they put them on a spreadsheet. And then if for some reason you need it, it doesn't matter who says it. If somebody's going to need it, you give it to them. You hand that off to that NPC so that you're not always just coming up with stuff off the cuff, no matter what NPC is talking. So if you go up with the bartender and you're like, hey, so have you heard anything around town? And you didn't plan the bartender to do anything more than serve drinks. Well, now you've got this little bit of a list of secret things that you can add real fast that they don't know that you really didn't plan for the bartender to say. And he now gives them that little bit of an idea of what's going on. So I've got a quick question. So Shadowlander 193 says, is it better to have a long con mastermind or episodic villains for a campaign? So are we talking long campaign, like one single mastermind campaign BBEG compared to sprinkles of bad guys throughout? Campaign long, involved in every plot, subplot, who the parties know since the very start, whether they know they're the villain. Both, I think, is the best way to put that. You want to have not my idea, the idea is from this book. You want to have an ending goal.
Yeah.
You don't want to have an ending boss. You can have an ending boss, but you want to have an ending goal. If the ending goal is to save the princess, then save the princess. How you get to saving the princess, that's what the story will develop. A good way that this was done, and a good way to see this done very in the overarching world of D&D and streaming specifically is Critical Role Season 2, when you find out that the end boss is Mollymawk, who was a character who was originally a player, and nobody, and even if you talk and you listen to some of the background of what Matt was talking, he states that, you know, the players kind of brought that to him. It wasn't the plan. There's always a plan. You can create a plan. And I'm going to quote somebody off of The Flash, Captain Cold. You know, you create the plan, you prep for the plan, you wait for the plan to fall apart, and then you throw away the plan. You know, this is how this works. You always have something ready. And then when the players change that, you now have an idea more so of what the players want in the game, and then you can kind of revert. But there's always ways to take those options and let them get what they want and then put them right back on the same path. And I don't consider that railroading. Railroading is when you take the agency out of the characters. And that means that whatever the character does, it's not going to matter. It's not true. What you're just trying to do is making sure that they're still on the event that they wanted to be on in the first place. If the idea was the king said, hey, go find my daughter in the tower at the top of the largest mountain in the world, I need you to go get her and bring her back. And let's say you run into a horde of goblins. Well, that's going to deter you from that quest. But it doesn't mean it has to direct you off the quest. It just means you deter and then come back. Deter and you come back. And those, I think, are where I would state the long campaign mastermind is the end goal. Your sprinkled little bosses throughout the game or throughout the story are just there to support the story. So not only does it doesn't always have to tie back to the end goal, though, because that end goal for you might not be the end goal for the king down the street. It might not be the end goal for the archfey that's watching over this realm. It might not be the end goal for the demon that has now possessed one of your players. There's end goals everywhere. And they can now tie loops together. One thing I did like that you wrote at the beginning of your story is you like to make sure that people have connections to at least one other player in the book or in your party. And I think that is very unique. And it's helpful. It's helpful for a DM because you can then weave the threads a little easier. It's hard when everybody goes, this is my backstory, this is my backstory, this is my backstory, and you go,
how do they work
together?
Does
A, B, and Z work?
And I definitely found that the most impactful place that became relevant and noticeable to me was when we were playing games with evil characters, where the PCs were playing evil. Is if you don't have some sort of connection, some sort of tie to the rest of the party, then there is no party when you're all evil. And all evil. Those games
There's no
will fall
reason
off the
for those
rails.
evil people to work together.
Absolutely. And so building in emotional connections or personal connections, things that draw the players together, that sort of supersede individual player goals, will help keep a party drawn together. And to your point about like railroading, I think I talk about in my book, there's one way I like to think about it is like you're the driver of a car and you're taking a road trip from one side of the country to the other side of the country. You might know that, hey, you're going from California to Washington, D.C. Your players are navigating, right? You're driving the car and you know where you're going to end up eventually, but let them pick all of the sightseeing destinations. Let them pick all the turns along the way. You just have to get them to the end. It's not a railroad if they're taking all the turns and letting you
they got to see
going.
They got to see the 100-foot yarn ball of yarn. You got to go see that.
Exactly. So I try and think of it like that, is like, even if I know where I want the game to end, which I usually do, because I usually start writing with what I want the big ending to be. I just think that's a really effective way. I like working backwards like that. Even though I know that, I still want my players to have choices. I want their decisions to have meaning, and I want the story to follow the road that they're plotting to get there.
I hope that gives a little bit of, it was a little bit tangenty, but I hope that gives a little bit of an idea of what you were asking, Shadow, exactly how or what's better. Like I said, I don't think it's easier or preferred. I think they have to both be there in order for the game to really make sense. But like I said, it doesn't always have to have a BBEG at the end. It could be something that just needs to happen.
Yeah.
You
And
know.
I've had some pretty successful stories that rather than, a big face off with the BBEG at the end, like you learn so much about the villain, you learn so much about their backstory, and you understand them to a degree that by the time you get to that final face off, you don't want to destroy them. You want to like help them reform, or you want to help them
Right.
see that, yeah, your plans might be right, but you're going about it in the wrong way. So maybe that there's a way we can work together equitably and solve this problem. Those are pretty awesome stories too. Like you don't always have to end with a great big battle against this one
it's
guy.
always fun to end with a giant battle, but it's also, I will say though, normally when you end with a giant battle, that's your last session. Like,
Yeah.
You're not playing and role playing for 4 hours. No. Those end battles are your 4 hour session. That's your day, is a giant battle, and that can be extremely taxing to both the player and the dungeon master. So, I got very good at telling my players early on in the story that, there's going to be days where we're not going to have a combat at all. There's going to be days where we might have all combat, but I'm going to make sure that those days don't overlap every week, because otherwise we're either going to be very slow, or people are just finding all this information out, and then you're on information overload, or you're on combat overload, which just means you're crunching numbers and making sure that everybody's hitting the hardest they can, and both can be extremely taxing.
It can be. And I think an important thing to remember to try and do is that even when you have a day that's filled with one or the other, to try and find little moments where the players who are playing for the opposite reason still have an opportunity to get what they're looking for out of the game. So even if you're stuck in combat for 4 hours, have a moment or an initiative on the combat tracker point where brief conversations can take place, where your villains have some cheeky thing that they're throwing out there, and the players can respond to it. So you still get the opportunity for role play even mid combat, things like that. Or if you're just doing an all role play day, let there be some skill challenges or some little like tiny quests where you could still have a few combat dice rolled or skill check dice rolled by those people who are more worried about the numbers or more interested in the math and all that kind of stuff.
No, I agree completely. Right. So, tips and tricks of creating an NPC now. I guess that would be the next step. So we've come up with the different types of NPCs. We've got your protagonist, your antagonist, your bystanders, all that. Now we got to give these people some ideas of how to make this work for them, because this is where the nitty gritty comes in. This is where we as game masters have to have something up our sleeve no matter what happens, and it's very difficult at times.
Yeah, it especially when, the DM can have as many plans as they want, but those only go as far as the players have ideas. And and as soon as a player has an idea, then whatever plans you had are pretty much out the window. But that's the beauty of the game, right? It's all improv, and it's all yes and type stuff,
Right.
And I love that part. I think that's one of the most cool things about being a DM is seeing how quickly can I think on my feet and make the story that I wanted to tell fit the story that they want to be a part of.
Right.
So merging those two worlds together.
And sometimes that's the step, right? That's the point, is to be able to merge those two ideas together. We don't always want to, and for game masters out there, and I know they're out there because I've seen them, if you are not having fun at your table, you're doing it wrong. It's not just about the players at a D&D table, unless you're people like me who are paid to do this. That's a little different. If you're being paid to do it, it's more about your players than you, but you still need to have fun.
Yeah.
If you're not having fun, your players will not enjoy your story. Plain and simple. But if you're just playing with your friends and you feel that you are the one that is not having a good time, sit down with your players and let them know that what they are doing or what they are not doing is giving you a giant headache. And you can do that outside of the game and be very tactful with it. Maybe not the way I said it, but I also am military, so there is that. If I say that to somebody, they're going to kind of get it okay. Some organizations and places to say that might not be the best option, but make sure that they understand that you're dedicating time, energy, effort. You don't need every week to go off the rails so hard that you're burning buildings down. Like, this is not necessary. Enjoy and make sure that if your game master is pointing you in a direction and it still makes sense, it might be more fun following that direction a little bit, because nobody likes the characters that just randomly go off and start killing random people. And if you're me,
we've all seen it. Yeah.
if you're me, all of the guards are 5 levels higher than those players in most places.
There you go.
So guess what? They're going to jail, and then we've got to figure out a jail breakout scene, because otherwise they're going to sit there for quite a while. Or you have, that's where your quest giver comes in and goes, hey, I've got something I need done. I can get you out, but now you got to do something for me. And this gets you back on track. These are things that game masters have.
Yeah, you always have the ability to right the ship, regardless of how much they're trying to tip it over. That, I think that is one of the best things about being in the DM seat is you do have the ability to control the game. You can, there's a screen for a reason. I've heard other DMs say that, like, if things are just really going off the rails, sometimes it doesn't matter what the dice roll say. You just need the numbers to equal what you need to happen. So
and
because
it happens more of time. It happens more than you think.
Yeah, it does. It does. I do think I will say, though, I have found in situations like that.
I try not to fudge dice, though. I think dice tell an amazing story.
Yeah. Yeah, I do say that a lot.
I might fudge what I believe a skill check might be, or what somebody's AC might be, but I'm not going to fudge a dice roll, because those sometimes just tell amazing stories.
Yeah, I have said many times that the dice know the story, right? They understand what's supposed to be happening, and some of the worst rolls end up being the best stories to tell.
Right.
Which is, you don't want to just everything ends up being a critical success. It's pretty boring when that happens. Weaknesses are just as interesting, sometimes more so than strengths.
I love a character who has a flaw. I don't know what it is about it. I love a character. If a player comes to me and he goes, this is what I've got, this is my idea, but this is what I want my character to have to deal with. Oh, I'm totally down, because I'm going to play on that to the point where you're either going to hate me for it, or that character is going to be a grown character, because I'm going to make sure that you feel it. And it's great, though, because those are the reasons those characters want to be played, right? It's, if you've got an alcohol problem, guess what? Every single bar, there's going to be some lady who wants to give you drinks. Don't know why, but she is. And I want you to play that out, because I want you to develop. I want you to get better. I want you to improve.
Because that really is the hero's journey, right? It's not just overcoming the obstacles in the world, it's overcoming the obstacles in yourself,
right? Which
I think is, on a personal level, a far more interesting story than just swinging a sword.
Yeah, I hate the people that bring me just nothing but Billy badasses. I'm sorry, it bores the crap out. I'm like, really? This is your character? Why are we going to do this? But yeah, so we got to roll a 1 minute ad here for a second. So just take a break, have a drink, go to the restroom, and we'll see you guys back in just a minute. All right. And for our people who subscribe, you can still hear me. Hi, guys.
It's a good time to crack open another Guinness.
There you go. Oh, Guinness, nice. I personally am drinking a Blue Moon tonight. That's because I
That's
don't have
another
any
one of my
more.
favorites.
I don't have any more stouts or porters in my fridge. So,
I really like the Black Butte Porter. That's one of my favorites.
oh, nice. Fatal flaw is the core of a great character. I agree.
Agreed.
And I will,
Yeah,
Yep.
definitely.
I like Shadow. Shadow is if he doesn't subscribe, he still is one of my favorite in our community because he's always asking questions. And he's
That's
a game
great.
master himself. He's been on our show twice. He is actually the only. Nope, can't say it now. Two people. I've had two people so far in 52 episodes that have been on the show more than once. He's been one. And right now he will. Those are the only two that have been on the show more than once, and that'll happen all the way up until after September because I'm booked until September right now, guys, which is amazing. I've never been that way. Blue moons are good. Shadow is listening because he must have subscribed.
He's a subscriber. Cheers to that, mate.
Yep. Unless they didn't start the ad. Oh, they did start the ad.
Yep,
already.
ad's over.
Ad's over. That's fine. But no, blue moons are really good. They're just a nice, relaxing summer ale that I like to have during summer. I kind of dive away when it's 90 to 100 degrees outside to something that makes me feel like I just ate a whole loaf of bread, like a heavy porter or a heavy imperial stout.
They're my go-to, but when I'm outside in the heat, I'll take any of those fruity, very light, like anything that's just refreshing, you know?
Yeah, I can't do sours. I've tried my hardest.
yeah.
I can't do sours. But I can do light ales, IPAs, some pale ales, lagers, those types. Like I enjoy those during the summer. Wintertime, nah, I'm going straight heavy. I'm going
Yep.
dark, and I'm just gonna have a good time because they're delicious. But we have a very large community of microbrews around here too in Southern Virginia. So it's
that's awesome.
I have my choice of ale. So there's that. And a lot of times when I'm on stream, I actually have picked up an ale or two from a local brewery around here. I don't always talk about it. Maybe I should do that. So,
Good conversation for a tavern.
yeah, right. So fatal, yeah, but Shadow says the fatal flaw is the core of a great character, and I do agree. Even if you now, I know for a fact that we have things like Critical Role, like Dimension 20. Listen to those characters being built. There's always a flaw. There's always a flaw. And it doesn't mean you have to, but it makes the character much more realistic and gives the player something to work with on an everyday moment. Because those flaws are what's going to decide the player's decisions on a lot of things.
Yep.
And if the flaw is, he's very protective, well, that means that whenever somebody is in trouble, most likely that player is going out the window. Does it matter? No, because that's his deal. That's who he is.
And not just player characters either. NPCs with flaws are really awesome because they can give extra ways for your characters to interact with them. Like if they have a gambling problem, you can rope an NPC into a game of cards or something like that. Or if they take personal attacks very, very angrily, there's just a lot of ways.
Or they're greedy, vain,
super greedy. Yeah, those kind of things. If they become known to the players, make a really dynamic NPC, and it gives them another way to interact.
They can also be really fun because those are those types of things that happen to an NPC where then it might not be combat needed. If you can get to if you can tweak that flaw, or you can, as I tell people all the time, if you can fluff people's feathers, they might be a little more friendly towards you. So if you come up to somebody and they're like extremely greedy, they've got a giant pile of gold surrounding their throne. I'm thinking directly from a specific kobold in the Tomb of Annihilation module where that's the only thing they want. They want gold, they want riches, they want just everything shiny. And you walk in with, 50 gold and you throw it to his pile, he might talk to you a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
Or he might try to stab you because he knows you have money. But there's that. Kobolds really probably aren't going to do that. Though they are greedy and crazy, most of them are extremely skittish and scared. So because they're only like 2.5 feet tall. So there is that.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a kobold, I can understand why you're scared of dogs and things like that too. Like, yeah, terrifying.
Terrifying little ankle biters. But yeah, no, this is where NPCs are so much fun. I have our tech is a very old player of mine. We've been playing now for 4 to 5 years together. And one of the NPCs that I created, I had been watching Blacklist for way too much. And there was a guy named Red Reddington in there. And I created a tiefling character that was built strictly off of that character. And he became the Red Reddington of our entire campaign. And his character fell in love with the idea. So he was the informant to the guy the entire campaign.
Awesome.
So he would get random messages from him stating like, hey, I know you're in this area of the world. I've got something I need taken care of here. Can you work on this while you're on whatever else you're doing? And he would have these little mini missions that he would skirt around. Sometimes he'd dip out in the middle of the night when nobody's looking, that kind of thing, go take care of what he had to and come back. He was a bard too, which made life so much funnier.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it was a bard. It was
Bards are great.
And we had a really good fun time with him. But
like
it
that
was
idea.
just those uniques.
Yeah, that borrowing that you did though, and I would say absolutely, if you're a DM, whenever you're watching a movie, I know, we're meant to watch the main characters, which are like your PCs.
Yeah.
But just pay attention to all the support cast, because they're doing the same thing in movies that you are wanting to do
with
at your
PCs.
tabletop. Is you want to create a character that is unique, engageable, and fun in a very, very short amount of time for just a quick, 1 or 2 lines sometimes.
Yeah.
And yet they still have to feel like they have a whole backstory, like they have a whole life, and they're a part of something bigger. And so,
because if they don't, that's the character. I'm not lying. You could have 60 characters prepped for this session, and your 61 is the guy that they're going to find who has nothing.
Yeah.
And that's what you call, what you call a trick that a GM calls reskinning. And you go, okay, they've not ran into characters 5, 6, and 7, so let's pick 6, and he is now this guy. If it works. I'm not saying just do that, because that could get really weird if he's not really built that way. Like if you say, hey, this is the butcher's son, and you pull from, the king's court, might be a little weird.
That would be a little awkward.
You have some playroom, because remember, they only know what you've told them.
Right.
One thing I had to learn very early in my DMing career: if you are going to give a plot, prepare that plot early, because they're going to take it if you don't. They still might take plots E that you didn't have planned. But if you've told them plots A, B, and C, and they pick B, and you really didn't have B planned, it's more on you than it is on the fact that you're trying to improv it out.
That is true.
So
and nobody likes ending a session because, I hadn't really prepared for that. So let's pick this up next week. Like, no, if you're in the heart of it, you want to be able to keep going, keep the story moving when they're excited about it.
Yeah. So one thing I like to do with my games, and my players will tell you, is I'm a Michael Bay movie. Big beginning. Make sure that the beginning is exciting, because that's what starts the whole program. That's what starts the whole session. It doesn't matter. You think about James Bond, you think all these big movies like that, it would allow us to push that. But instead, what you want a big beginning, and then you need something at the end that makes them want to come back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So cliffhanger at the end, big beginning, everything else should match up. Those are biggest tips I can give people. Big beginning, middle can be okay, end on cliffhanger because you want them to come back for more. And that can be an NPC, that can be an event, that can be an item, that could be both. There's items that are NPCs and they don't realize it.
Yeah,
The item
it's
starts
true.
talking.
Those are great items. I love intelligent items, especially intelligent cursed items where you just can't throw it away when they get annoying.
Get rid of it. God, this stupid thing won't stop talking. Yeah, that's fun. I challenge my players a lot of times, especially with those types of things with like cursed items and stuff like that. I play it to make sure it's the guy who doesn't like to talk in the group. So that there's always a opportunity for the item to be like, hey, so what do you think about this? And the guy's like, crap, I gotta talk. I gotta talk to the item. The item's talking to me. I had a character that did that, and he would ignore the item. And then I just became the nag as the item because it was like, hey, you're not gonna say anything to me? Like, what the hell? You picked me up. And I start kind of going into the genie mentality off of Aladdin, where it's like, did you pick me up? Did you touch my sword? You're the guy.
That's so funny.
But yeah, I know. And these moments are the moments that you remember, and you're like, oh my God, I actually did this to my players. But my players will remember those moments. They'll remember too. Yeah. Forever. And then they come back years later and they're like, do you remember when you tortured me with that stupid sword? Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%.
I do. I was having a great time. And
it's having a good time. And you seem
like
to
you were
too, because if you didn't,
fun.
you wouldn't
if
remember.
You're doing things that are fun for yourself, then the players are going to have fun too.
Agreed. So what's some tips for you for a supporting NPC, for a supporting actor?
So one thing that I've done that's a lot of fun and is early on, like during your session 0 or your introduction session, I like to have the players each write out their own NPC and then give you those NPCs to later put into the game. So that, I mean, you can put them wherever you want. You can have them be quest givers or whatever, but they come up with like the character name and some of the mannerisms and stuff. And so then you just have like this little script, like you're almost like you're doing impromptu on a stage, it's like
right
later on in a game, you can pull that up and be like, oh, okay, here's Farmer John, and
right.
and throw them into the game. And then your characters, the one who created it especially, is gonna be like, oh my God, that's my NPC. That's the one I put in the game. And it really draws them into that character because they think it's going to be extra important. You don't have to make them extra important, but
right,
it definitely grabs attention. So I just think that's just kind of a fun way of having.
Yeah, I try to make sure that my characters can give me three characters that they would have connections with, no matter. Yeah. And normally it's home characters. Like I tortured. I'm sorry, Eric. It's our tech guy. I pick on him a lot because I know he can handle it. His last character that we played in our homebrew was a Druid of the Shepherd, and after talking with him, I was like, so what does this place look like? And we kind of came up with this exotic wildlife reserve where all the Druids are taking care of the ones in the area and all this stuff. And he wrote out the entire organization of the Shepherd's crew. And of course, I slaughtered about 3/4 of them. And I watched that poor man cry, and I felt really bad. And at the same time, I felt like I had achieved what my goal was, because I wanted his character was a very happy-go-lucky character, but there was really no reason for it yet. And I was like, okay, so you really don't have any trauma happening to you. And I asked him, I was like, has any traumatic experience ever happened to you? Do you understand what that could do to your character? And he goes, nope. I said, okay, well, then let's find out what it does. Long story short, his father was a high up version of the order, went off to protect unicorns in the north, found out that the drow had returned, corrupted his father, and then his father came back with a bunch of drow druids riding nightmares and just wrecked the village.
That's a great cinematic image there.
Yeah, and all the characters or all the druids lived in like these giant tree houses, and like the elevators lifted kind of like just trees would just lift the limbs up and down, and the only people that survived was 3 of his siblings, and that's it. And then they took the siblings and a couple other refugees away, and the idea was then that they would have to then try to regather or anybody else that scattered, they wouldn't know where they went. So part of their plot then was to gather everybody back up and kind of rebuild the organization.
Crazy.
We never got to that point.
Yeah, well,
but
happened.
Yeah, that was a plan, and instead we dove into one of my absolute most incredible moments that I've had in D&D, which was the following arc. And this was planned out to be extremely gray in morality, and nobody really knew who was the bad guy and who was the good guy for about 17 episodes until the end. And they were like, oh God, this is actually who the bad person is. And then in the end, he took on the ritual that allowed him then to become a werebear, which was pretty epic at the end. So I was excited. So he really played into it. The rest of the party loved it. They've told me multiple times to write this as a book, and I was like, there's way too much in that story to write for a book. But one day, maybe it'll happen one day. We'll see. I have to find time.
That's always a tricky part, is finding time. So many passions, so little time.
Yeah. I mean, I run 2 games weekly, paid games. We run our stream twice a week. I've got 4 little ones, full-time job. I find enough time to work out 1 hour a day and go to sleep. That's about it. Everything else is doing something else. Because when you've got 4 boys, any time that you have that you're not doing something is always with them, because they're just crazy. But I love them, all 4. Great. And that's why all my shows are late at night, because everybody's asleep.
It is the best time to record, when the rest of the house is quiet and everyone's asleep.
Everybody's quiet. It's just me and my computer, and I'm writing or I'm reading or I'm telling stories, and it's just my favorite just break in the day from everything. So
I think one other thing I'd throw in is as an idea for DMs.
Sure.
Is if you're playing with like a specific race of NPCs. I mean, one of the things I think a lot of is like in Critical Role season 2, where they're in the Dwarven City. It is insane to me the way that Matt is able to have almost 20 different voices that are similar for all of his dwarves. But for me, I have a couple of dwarven voices that I can do, but I certainly don't have enough to make an entire enclave of different sounding dwarves. But I think of like characteristics that run through the society. So like dwarves are typically pretty proud,
right? And
instead try and think of how many different ways are there to be proud or to show pride or have pride,
right?
And then you can attach different methods of being proud of something or having a different type of pride to different dwarves, and have them feel different without actually having to change your voice into 20 different dwarven dialects.
Yeah, no,
it's incredible.
It's a skill that very few people have.
Yeah.
And being able to capitalize on it to that extent in a world where you need to build this mass society is incredible.
But I do think that, like I said, finding just a couple things that are make them feel like, yes, they're still members of the same community, yet they have these unique differences. Another way you can do it is with different patterns of speech or different catchphrases. I think catchphrases are great. I can always clue my players into who's going to be a rumor provider by saying something like, well, you didn't hear from me, and looking all shifty and
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
like,
The
yeah, this
shifty
guy. Yeah, exactly.
No matter the
But
voice, you didn't hear
yeah,
from me.
you didn't hear it from me. And then stuff like that, like just give them catchphrases, give them patterns of speech. They can all have the same voice or they can have no voice, but you can
Right.
still make them feel very, very different.
Yeah. You can always remember too depending on if you're playing in person or on a screen, if you're trying to be impactful, lean in, talk heavier, give more emphasis to your voice. If you're in real life, get up,
Yeah.
go walk over to the player. If it's your friend and you really have this intense moment, grab him by the shirt. Like, like, give them that emotion that you want to portray from your NPC. If let's say, and I'm just going to do something extremely basic, is you walk into a tavern, you start talking to the girl at the bar, and the dude behind you comes over and is like, "Why are you talking to my girl?" There's that way of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's you walking up to the guy, like after you are talking, you see a guy out of the corner of your eye, and you actually get up out of your chair, you walk over to the player, and you kind of turn him towards you. You're like, "Why are you talking to my girl?" Okay,
Right.
you're going to see the difference, and the players are going to see the difference, and you're also going to see the expression change on the player's face. If the player stays with a completely straight face, one of two things: one, they have no expression whatsoever, and they're just really good at a poker face, or two, you need to be a little more intense, and then you
Right.
just get a little more intense. But yeah, there are those
On
people
things
though
like
that
that.
you can do as intense as possible, and they're still like, I can't break this, but
I will find a way.
I will find exactly. I will find a way. I will find what breaks you, and I will do it just so I can see the change in your voice or the change in your face. But yeah, I'm hoping, as I say every week, I'm hoping something that we say will help a game master out there one day. And if anybody does get help from this is my charge to you. In 2 days, this goes up on YouTube. Go post that comment up there. Not only will it help the YouTube channel, but also it will let me know that something I'm saying and something my guests are saying is helpful, because that is the main goal of this channel. And though sometimes we go on crazy tangents about politics and other crazy things like that, which doesn't normally happen, and I usually fight against it, the majority of this channel is to talk about the game and about how we can improve it as game masters. So, Robert, do you have anything else you would like to share, as we are already an hour and a half?
I would just say, as you're making your NPCs, as you're developing your NPCs, one of the most important things to always remember is to take meticulous notes. If you have to create an NPC on the spot because your characters force it upon you, which they will always, write it down, because there's a very good chance that that character you just made is going to be their new favorite NPC. And you want to make sure that when they come back to visit them again because they loved this NPC,
Yep.
you remember what they sound like, what they said, what connection they're going to have to the party. And then you can build that, and it can become just as important to your story as the ones that you had originally written into it were. But if you don't make those notes in a week or 2 weeks time, when you come back to that session or that character, you might not remember what was so cool about it in the first place.
Agreed. No, 100%. And if you are people like some of the players on Critical Role, that randomly like to sending notes or, message type stuff, you got to keep track of those things. If you've got those players, know your players, what your players like to do, because sometimes it could be, it depends on how well you want to play things up. But if people start talking to plants and animals, you're going to want to know what that animal would talk about. Now, mind you, my other ploy, I talk to you about this book all the time. This book is amazing. If I can see at the show, it is The Monsters Know What They're Doing.
Oh, yeah.
And it explains what happens when you have low intellect and when you have low wisdom. And the reason I say that is because beasts normally have low intellect and low wisdom. So it'll kind of give you a better clue on how to interact with those things. A lot of times beasts are only going to know one word answers. They're going to think specific things like eat, sleep, kill, those types of things. And they're not really going to respond with giant, long conversations. I had a fun point of doing that with my Tomb of Annihilation game when somebody tried to speak to a T-Rex, and they wondered what he was what he wanted, what was he going to tell them? He was going to tell them he's hungry. That's all he said the entire time. Food, please. And he didn't even say please. He said food now, because that's what he says. When you're the king of the jungle, you don't say please. You just say now.
Right. No, I think that's an excellent point. I've definitely utilized similar tactics when people use like plant speak or speak with animals, things like that. Yeah. It is important to keep in mind what sort of information they're going to have. Don't think in terms of constructs that we understand, like times of day or weeks or months. You know, oh, when did the people on 2 feet cross here? You say, well, I was sleeping in the shade.
Right.
So then they might know, okay, well, it was a hot part of the day, maybe. So maybe it was midday when they came through.
Oh, I saw the moon twice,
Right.
Okay, it was 2 days ago, It's nothing. You got to think of how animals would understand things. They're thinking things by their surrounding. When was the last time you saw this type of creature? Well, the trees were bare. Okay, that was last winter. Like, holy crap, we've been here 6 months before we saw this thing. You're probably not the guy we're looking for.
Right. Exactly.
With plants, I normally don't have them speak. I have them grow, or I have them twitch. If you're talking to a tree and you're like, hey, which way did it go? And the tree limb kind of goes like this. Okay, cool. That's the tree telling you which way it went. It's not saying any answer. But yeah, these are just little tidbits of things that you can use for NPCs, especially for those weird ones that you're a little bit unsure of. Should I have an accent? Should I have a voice for them? And we're not all professional voice actors. We're not all professional actors. So you have to make sure that your group understands that, because you are going to get those people that are like, well, I saw this on a show and that's how they treated this thing. Well, I get that, but also, the crabgrass that talks in sentences is going to be way different in his game than it is going to be in mine.
Right.
So.
Well, and I think you do have to treat NPC, or you have to treat familiars and animal companions a little bit differently, because they do have a slightly different level of intelligence and wisdom and connection to the player. But I do like with those, especially animal companions, I still don't like to talk in sentences. I like to more express an emotion. How is the animal feeling? Are they afraid? Or
one of my favorite ones to have people try to understand or speak with is when people start talking to pseudo dragons. Makes me laugh, because they don't talk in anything other than colors.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So if you're talking to, if you're like, hey, what is he thinking? And you go, oh, well, he's blue. What do you mean he's blue? That's all you see in your head. You see blue. That's it. What does that mean? I mean, you decide that. If you want to insight it, we'll see if we can figure this out. But your decision is, okay, you can start taking understandings of things. If it's red, he's probably angry or extremely excited about something.
Blue might be calm.
He's sad, or whatever.
For sure,
those types of basic mechanics on things. But otherwise, you're giving them those colors because that's what those colors would mean to that creature. But otherwise, it's really difficult to state anything else, because pseudo dragons don't talk. So, this was a fun conversation, and I'm hoping a lot of people got some good tidbits out of it. I got some interesting ideas that even I personally, I'm like, oh, I could use that in my game. Specifically and I know some of these things, more of it's like I'm rehearing it over again and going, yeah, you're right, maybe I should use that more often. Specifically the finding impersonations of celebrities and stuff like that. Like, I'm a horrible actor on things like that, but if I know a celebrity's mannerisms and stuff like that, I could use them for that. So the next time we have a kobold and he sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you'll know he's a very scary kobold. tell you
Right,
what.
and that's the great thing. Like even if they don't sound anything like it, and your players can't pick up that's where it came from,
Yeah,
it's still going to have a unique voice because it's
right.
something that you're understanding in your own mind, right? So you're
Right.
recreating this
And then you can
even
make it helpful, because then you know if they ever run into that character again, when you write down your little note, you can say, act like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and
exactly.
you get it. You
Yep.
might not sound like it at all, but
Right. And I don't
they're
know how
gonna
many
pick it up on that.
kobolds are going to be actually talking about getting to the chopper, but who knows?
Yeah,
You never know.
But yeah. So Robert, thank you again for coming on the show, hanging out with us,
Absolutely.
talking about NPCs and the goofy things that we do here at the bar. But it is last call. It is 10:30. It is time for me to close the bar down. So raise a glass. Hopefully we'll see everybody here next week, as we have Todd Putman, who you guys might not know by the name, but he runs one of the largest Facebook channels out there for terrain. So if you've ever seen all the Dwarven Forge crazy stuff like that, he runs a channel that I think just hit. Now I'm going to say the number, and it's probably going to be wrong because I'm not good at this. But I believe he said 15,000. But like I said, I'm going to say that number, and it's probably like a giant amount higher than that. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Oh God, yeah, it's 32,000. Sorry, my bad. So 32,000 people, and he does these massive displays for people like Cobalt Fight Club and his own personal game. And I told him one day that if I ever have the ability to come play in a game where an entire table is set up in Dwarven Forge, that I will be there, because it is incredible. So we'll be talking about him, about environments, and about what to put in a table, kind of like how do you make a table feel unique without having to spend $1 million, those types of things. And we're looking forward to talking with him. And he's also going to give us some good tips of, how to create dungeons, how to create environments, things like that. So looking forward to it. Don't forget, Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, episode 2 of Plots in Darkenhaven launches, Tale of Two Ghosts. And that was with our wonderful special guest here, Robert Walker. And we'll see him in Bowen and find out how good of a player he is, because I'm
Very
excited to play.
Very excited.
Until then, we'll see you guys all next week on the tavern, and have a good night.